Time on the breakfast show. Let's take a look. 21 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, which is perfect timing as we join up this morning with Dr. Computer. Alex Newman. Good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning, Gerry. How are you doing today?
I'm doing rather well, actually. The sun's shining, but it's very hazy.
Oh, yes. You know, it's all that the Sahara desert dust
Yeah,
coming in,
amazing, isn't it?
making for interesting sunrises and sunsets. It reminds me of that line from Lord of the Rings. Blood has been shed, a red sun rises, or something like that. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah.
No, not at all. We have an expression: red at night is shepherd's delight. Red in the warning, sailor's warning.
Ooh, I was
There we
not
go.
aware of that.
Oh yes, live and learn.
Yeah.
So, what have you been up to?
Oh, just working hard and trying to fix a lot of things at home now that the hardware stores are open. So I'm making as much use of that valuable but limited time we have to leave the house in order to get some parts and things that I need, like switches and outlets and little things that break. I did get my shower fixed. I did which was appreciated by most of my neighbors. So yeah, it's been an interesting couple of days, definitely.
It saves you washing yourself down in the garden. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, having to explain every time, why are you taking your clothes off outside, and this is not that kind of neighborhood.
You must be making a lot of money. I mean, they must be paying you to put them back on again.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I just put on some slow music and put stuff on.
You say now, I don't know if you remember it. I think it was one of the first animations that sort of came. Do you remember that animation they did of the baby? It was an animation. They did an animation of a baby. This was when sort of animation first came out. Everybody was absolutely in awe of this dancing baby.
Oh, the dancing baby, that people had it on their websites and everything. And I think it was this song. I can't stop this feeling deep inside of me. I can't remember the name of the song. It was featured in I think Ally McBeal. It was, or something like that.
But it was we thought it was quite innovative at the time, didn't we?
Yeah. Now it's just a throwback to the early '90s and the beginning of the internet. At least the internet that we know and love, the web. So yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. Well, talking about the web, because that's one of the things we wanted to touch on this morning, because I got a little thing. I don't know if you used Malwarebytes, but they sent me an interesting little thing yesterday where they were discussing VPNs and the merits of using a VPN and so on and so forth. And I don't know. I sort of, probably like a lot of people, I sort of use my VPN if I want to watch something in particular in another area. But you're obviously in the know of this. What is is there any benefit from using a VPN all the time?
I wouldn't say a VPN, I mean, using a VPN all the time is something for everyone. I mean, there are definitely people who would benefit from using a VPN like all the time. For example, if you handle a lot of delicate information, I know a lot of journalists, for example, that deal with economic news or social news or political news. They try to be careful with what they do and how they do it and how they talk to their sources and things like that. And those people usually will use a VPN, if not all the time, at least most of the time, unless they're on like a trusted network. And even then, being on a trusted network, they want to make sure that, for example, if they are researching a subject or whatever, the research doesn't necessarily tie them back. The research doesn't tie itself back to them or their organizations or things like that. Of course, there are bad actors as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they did mention that one of the main uses of things like that would be with corporate use, where they say want to keep their information secure.
Definitely. I mean, one of the interesting things about VPNs is that they started out as ways to connect different branches of a company using the internet. Because if you have several locations, for example, in the same city, you can usually lease or rent or pay for virtual dedicated circuits or things like that that will connect one of your branches to another or to like a remote office or things like that.
Uh-huh.
And you can be sure, at least with a high degree of, trust in if you can trust your local telephone provider or whatever, that your network is free from eavesdropping or anything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
there are occasions, and there are also regulations with certain companies, such as banks and lawyers and things like that, where things have to be at least, you have to at least have uh, some form of encryption so that at least a trivial eavesdropper couldn't just, plug in somewhere and listen to your traffic. I remember talking to Vinton Cerf. Dr. Cerf is one of the
I remember that.
co-inventors of TCP/IP and the internet, and he's the chief evangelist for Google. And I talked to him back in 2011, and then again in 2013. He was actually in Panama for 2015's summit, the presidential summit, and the topic was security and how Google was taking it seriously back then. And even back then, we're talking the beginning of 2011, Google was encrypting all traffic between all of its branches and starting to, at the time, encrypt traffic with their users. But he told me at the time that they were on the process of enabling encryption even inside their own data centers, even within computers that are basically sitting in the same rack, because you never know who can just, you know, try to exploit some sort of vulnerability and just go in the back of one of these racks and plug something in. So they were in the process of doing that. And VPNs is kind of an extension of that. It started out, as you say, by being a tool for computers to be able to connect back to their home offices without fear of having their data stolen or eavesdrop on or whatever. If you remember way back when you were setting up your email connections and whatever, you used to use this protocol called POP3 or even IMAP now without any sort of encryption. And anybody on the same Wi-Fi network or upstream from you could actually it was being transmitted over the internet and be able to read your email and things like that. Of course, there have been a lot of strides in encryption, and now most decent email services won't even let you connect if you're not encrypting your connection. But still, if you want an additional layer of security, then you resort to using a VPN.
And we're used to using a VPN. Say, like if I want to watch Netflix or I want to watch BBC iPlayer, we put ourselves in another country. But does a sort of VPN system? I mean, if I was in the States, I guess if I was in Washington, I could connect, I guess, to a VPN somewhere else in the United States.
Oh yes,
so you would still be speaking to be in the same country. But for instance, for us here in Panama, do we have any sort of local VPN connections? Or
yes, we do. It's interesting. There are two major VPN companies that I use on a daily basis. One of them is ExpressVPN, and the other one is NordVPN.
Mm-hmm.
Of the two, I like, and that's purely subjective manner, NordVPN more. And their main offices, believe it or not, are located here in Panama. But they don't have an exit node, at least last time I checked, in Panama. So if you're in the States, or let's say you go back to the UK to visit family or whatever, and you want to watch, I don't know, TVN Channel 2 or whatever, and it doesn't show up on your Roku or on your devices or whatever, or if you try to watch it online, it says, I'm sorry, but you're not in, Panama, so we're not going to let you watch or whatever. You can use ExpressVPN, which is located somewhere else, to connect out of Panama and make it look like you're in Panama while you're using that VPN, which is interesting. A lot of people that are outside Panama right now and want to watch content that is only available in Panama, like Cable Onda or TVN Go or whatever, then they use ExpressVPN and exit out of Panama.
Okay, because ExpressVPN is the one that I'm using, and I tell you what I thought rather amusing was when I got my Amazon Fire Stick, which I use on my TV, which is great. And of course, they're always, these are the people that sort of come and say, you can't watch this because you're in this area, you can't watch that because you're in that area. But they actually supply you with a VPN app on your Fire Stick. And I thought that was rather amusing.
Yeah, it is. It has to do with legal restrictions and things like these intellectual property rights and how they're negotiated between distributors such as Amazon and Apple TV and Netflix and everybody else, and the rights holders. And usually, some of these rights are negotiated on a regional basis. It's like, I'll let you distribute this across the world for a set amount of money, but for half, I'll let you do it in every other place but the U.S. or whatever. So I'm not too familiar, or I don't take too kindly to these artificial borders or whatever, but it's a fact of life, and there's VPNs around that. Now, that being said, it's a little bit difficult for some people to set up VPNs on devices that don't support them. You, for example, have an Amazon Fire Stick that does, and Android boxes, those Android TV boxes that basically turn your TV into a giant Android tablet, also support VPNs such as ExpressVPN and NordVPN, because like the Fire Stick, they're just an Android device that's been made to hook up to a TV with a remote or whatever. But if you're running, for example, a device like an Apple TV or a Roku or whatever, those devices don't support VPNs themselves. So you have to resort to other tools, such as placing a VPN on your router or using what's called a DNS style VPN, which it isn't technically a VPN, but it does kind of trick some of these devices into thinking that you're actually in the country that you're supposed to be in. So one of the services that I use is called DNS for Me, and there's another one called Playmo.tv. And what those do is that they trick your device that doesn't support VPNs into asking for US content or Europe content or UK content by tweaking the way that it connects to the internet. Every time you hook up to the internet and type in a website address, such as CNN.com, there's something called the DNS or domain name system where your device asks your router asks its provider's DNS or whatever, usually, for the IP address of whatever it needs to connect to. And a lot of the times, these services are smart in the sense that if you're in Panama and you ask a Panama DNS server for some information, it'll give you the IP address of the closest server to you in order to save bandwidth and things like that. But if you ask another DNS server somewhere else on the internet, like one of these services, since that service is in the U.S., it will give you the U.S. server's address, which is not necessarily the most efficient thing, but it might be what you're looking for. And these services...
So carry on.
So, and these services provide that for you. They actually ask the question on your behalf and reply with the U.S. server's address. That being said, Netflix has been cracking down on a lot of these services, and what it does is it rejects connections from IP addresses that it knows are in certain countries. So if you use some of these services, you might from time to time see something that says, I'm sorry, but you're using some sort of proxy and you're not going to be able to watch this content. Netflix, I would say, is the most aggressive in that regard. And that's why a lot of people will use VPNs. In fact, I'm sure that at least once in the past 12 months, while using a VPN, Netflix has told you, hey, I think you're using something weird to connect to me. I'm not going to let you. And what you usually have to do in those instances is just pick another city to connect from, and then it works. So
yeah, that's exactly what I've had to do. Occasionally.
Yeah, it's very occasional. I mean, it's like you only have to do it like 3 or 4 times a year total, I think. But it is kind of a nuisance that a lot of people are willing to put up with.
So if you would agree with this, though, but I mean, for instance, Netflix, I find now that most of the time I don't bother with a VPN because I find that the content is improving so much. Because let's face it, a lot of the good content these days on Netflix is their own. And
that is correct.
I find I have access to really all that I really need without having to go around corners.
That is correct. Now, that being said, for example, there are some series on Netflix that you get like every season but the last one if you're outside the US, and you get every season up to the last one if you are in the US. And there are a couple of other series that, for example, you don't get any English subtitles for unless you kind of trick Netflix into thinking that you're in the US. And there are a lot of series out there that are from other countries, such as Korea or whatever, that you might want to have some English subtitles with, because you do handle Spanish. You've been here in Panama for a number of years, but still it's a little bit more comfortable for the brain just to be able to read stuff in English from time to time. And there are some series from the UK that the further north you go, the more difficult it is.
The more even the Brits need subtitles for that one.
Exactly. I mean, they're speaking English. It just doesn't sound like it.
Oh, I tell you, you're being very generous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that series, or at least heard of it, Peaky Blinders.
Of course, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like a tour of pretty much every single accent in the UK. And if you thought Downton Abbey was hard to understand from time to time, you have a whole different thing with Peaky Blinders. So
absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's fun to be able to have English subtitles to match whatever it is they're talking about with. So and to get the jokes and to also look them up, especially when it's like Cockney rhyming slang. So it's.
I mean, you get sort of jokes. You get sort of jokes like a duck going into a bar, don't you? It's
exactly.
Hey, tell me, any downsides to using a VPN?
Well, there are certain downsides. For example, a lot of VPN services will say it does not slow down your connection. That is mathematically provable false, in the sense that if you can send, for example, a certain amount of data in a certain amount of time, it will take exactly a little less time, a little more time to send that same data packaged in an encrypted form. It's like a certain amount of a liquid will be heavier if I put it in a cup, because I have to take into account the weight of the cup. It's mathematically impossible to have something take less time if it's encrypted properly. So you will have a certain amount of speed diminished by having everything encrypted, but the better VPNs will make that minimal, in the sense that, let's say you're paying for a 100 megabit per second connection like I am, with overhead and everything, I get speed tests to say that I have like 95, 96 megabit per second up and down. It'll probably go as far down as 90 or 85 or whatever if I'm using a VPN, a good one. Now, if it goes further down, I need to pick another node or I need to pick another service. So there's that. The other thing is, usually, most of the time, most VPNs will, by default, make all the traffic go through the VPN, so that the moment you connect to the VPN, you lose access to any local devices. So, for example, you're on your computer and you want to watch Netflix, but from another country or whatever, if you try to stream that to your local Chromecast or your local TV or whatever, it might not work. So you need to look into the settings of your VPN in order to check that it has a setting that says something like enable local traffic or disable all traffic going through the VPN. Because then if you check that, then only traffic that goes to the internet will continue through the VPN onto the internet, and local traffic, like if you have to print or anything like that, then will go to your local network. I'll give you an example. I have NordVPN when I want to do things like watch Netflix in the US or whatever, but I also have my office VPN for the company that I work for. If I run that, I can use my company phone, I can use my company portal and all the applications and whatever, but I can't print. I can't print on my own printer. So if I want to print, what I do is I'll just print it as a PDF, put it in a folder, and when I'm done, I'll disconnect from the VPN and just throw all the PDFs into the printer and print them out. Luckily, I rarely, if ever, I think I've only had to print like twice in the last 6 months. Fortunately, we do everything online. But things like insurance forms and whatever that still have to be delivered on paper for whatever reason. I mean, hopefully our insurance companies here in Panama will, welcome the 21st century sometime soon. But sometimes we have to print, and I have to disconnect from the VPN when I do that. So there's that. And also, I back up all my personal files and whatever on my local file server. But if I want to do that, I have to disconnect from the company VPN because I can't see my server when I'm on the company VPN. And that's like a company policy that I'm not going to, circumvent in any way or whatever because I don't really need to. But that's one of the things. If you have a VPN, usually unless you set it otherwise, it's like you disappear from your local network, which is a good thing. I mean, if your local network is Starbucks or whatever, then you don't want people being able to see your computer on the network or what it's doing or anything like that.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Alex, just very quickly before we go, because I saw the announcement, it came up by a couple of things. The Galaxy S20 Note is on its way.
That would be the Galaxy Note 20. Yeah, and it is.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see. Oh, yeah, but that's kind of a thing with the Note devices, so we'll have to wait.
This is 7 inches or something, or
7 inches?
It really is.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, I saw they sent me a thing yesterday. I mean, it's a big one. Yes. And by the way, did you watch the testing of the Z Flip that I sent you?
No, I'm gonna have to go and look for that.
No, I sent it to you last week. It's the guy who does because we were talking about the screen of the Z Flip.
Yeah, I think you sent me that, but I think I forgot to have a look at it. Please send it to me again. I'm sure I'm gonna have a lot of fun looking at that.
Oh yeah, it's quite interesting. So well, anything else quickly that's exciting we need to know about?
Well, I'm still testing the P40 Pro. The only thing that a lot of people are worried about is the banking applications. I mean,
this is what we talked about last week, and you didn't get it. Have you got around that?
I've run my NECI from Banismo. I'm still looking to run the Banco General application, and I'm going to ask around, see if my friends can let me know if they're using their other local banking applications. I want to make sure that I get like a comprehensive list of what works and what isn't working yet, because a lot of people are going to be looking out for the possibility of running their banking applications on this. I'm looking at the Note 20 news, and there's a Note 20, there's a Note 20 Plus, and a possible Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. That's going to be interesting. So
they call it a laptop, don't they?
Yeah. Well, one of the very, very few advantages of being my size is that it will still fit in my pants pocket. So
it'll still look small, right?
Yeah. It'll look like a tiny phone next to my large self.
Oh, I love it. Oh, wonderful. Well, look, Alex, do take care.
You too, and hope to talk to you next week.
Yeah, and as always, thanks very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, and remind your audience you can still listen to the breakfast show later today on pbcpanama.com, and if you want to listen to our conversation, it's going to be on my Instagram page, Vida Digital, and on my YouTube channel at Vida Digital on YouTube. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. All the best, Alex. Take care. And again, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Cheers.